Hi, I'm Paul Arthur. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we have lined up for you. A new Leger poll shows last week's federal budget has left very few Canadians feeling good about the financial prospects. Plus, despite trade tensions, Nova Scotia still sends its annual Christmas gift to Boston. And as Saskatchewan and Montreal prepare for the Grey Cup, we find out if either of the coaches aspire to be general managers.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. New Leger polling suggests Canadians were underwhelmed by affordability measures in the federal budget, with only 15% saying they think the Liberal spending proposals will improve their lives. Leger's Andrew N. says the budget has enough in it for supporters of various parties to make it difficult for any party to structure an election campaign around it.
I think Prime Minister Carney and the government, they've got in what they wanted to get in on that preparing the country's economy. You saw movement on some defense spending. Some movement on they talked about the major projects where the budget falls short. And I think this is probably the challenge for the government in the months ahead is on the affordability equation, which was still a very important theme amongst voters. I think everybody would be cautious about saying I can win an election on this budget. I think the Conservatives would, they're probably the most bullish about going to the polls, but I think there's to bring down the government solely on this is just the worst budget ever tabled, I think would be a bit problematic. There's still good support for some various elements. I think for the Liberals to be cavalier and saying, go ahead, bring us down, we want to run an election on our budget, I think that would be dangerous as well, because as I said earlier, they missed the boat on affordability. And I think that's a vulnerability if this turns into an election campaign. I think affordability would still play a fairly prominent role. And is the threat of Donald Trump and the Americans as top of mind for Canadians as it was in the in March, April earlier this year? So there's a lot of caution, I think, and so I think all parties, if they're looking at this rationally, would be a little cautious about how aggressive they want to fight this or fight on this in an election campaign.
The minority Liberals will need to secure additional votes or abstentions in Parliament to win approval of the budget in a House of Commons vote next week. Prime Minister Mark Carney will host a virtual meeting with the country's provincial and territorial leaders early next week. The premiers laid out their priorities in a letter to Carney Wednesday, saying infrastructure investments and the state of U.S.-Canada trade negotiations are high on their agenda. They say Canada's relationship with the U.S. has changed significantly since their last meeting in July. The leaders also want to talk about trade relations with China and India. There have been reports in the past week that Alberta and the federal government are in negotiations to sign a major accord that could reset their relationship. The goal apparently was to sign a formal memorandum of understanding and announce it before Sunday's Grey Cup game. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was asked about it Wednesday in Calgary and had this response.
Mark Carney needs to do only one thing for us to get a pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. There are trillions of dollars of international investment crying out for the chance to build that pipeline without any government support. All they need is the federal government to stop blocking it. Repeal the get out of the way and repeal the 9 bad laws that block energy projects. Get out of the way and remove the ban on shipping oil off the northwest coast of BC, a ban that only applies to Canadians because, of course, American tankers can travel between Alaska and California in those very same waters, so why not allow Canadians to do the same? Get out of the way and get rid of the Liberal industrial carbon tax so that we can actually produce enough oil to fill a future pipeline.
When asked if the departure of two Conservative MPs from caucus last week had prompted him to reflect on his leadership style, Poilievre's answer was a simple no. He says he will continue to be the only leader that's fighting for an affordable Canada. Tariff tensions between the United States and Canada have not put a damper on a Christmas tradition. The annual Tree for Boston was felled this morning in Lunenburg County, Nova Scotia. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu was on hand to officially receive the tree and took a turn holding the chainsaw to cut it down. The tree is an annual gift to the city of Boston in recognition of the aid sent following the Halifax explosion in 1917.
This is a very important tradition in Boston every single year, and my kids have grown up with it. So many people all around the city come every single year to celebrate the lighting of the Boston Common Christmas tree. And for me, it was important this year to personally come deliver our thanks to the people of Nova Scotia to keep this friendship and keep our relationship going strong. There were multiple moments where, as we've watched our federal government take actions that have been harmful to long-standing relationships and that have created economic pressures for people on both sides of the border. There was a moment where I wondered if Nova Scotia was still going to want to continue this tradition. I picked up the phone and called Premier Houston, and we had a lovely conversation and reaffirmed that this friendship dates back over a century and will continue on long after a particular presidential administration or regime. I wanted to make sure that Canadians know Boston is open for everyone. We are welcoming to all. We strive to be a home for everyone in our community, every culture, every generation, and we hope to continue welcoming our friends from Canada and from around the world to come see what's so special about our community.
We do have a big tree, 45 feet of it.
Yeah.
Tell me when you first planted it.
I think in '81, maybe a year before or a year after, and it was only a foot high.
And
now it's 45 feet high. It's amazing. It was a dream come true that this would happen.
The Halifax explosion happened when two tankers collided in the Halifax harbor on December 6, 1917. One tanker was loaded with explosives. More than 1,900 people were killed. When authorities in Boston got the news by telegraph, they sent teams via train to help, and when they arrived 2 days later, they were able to relieve the Nova Scotia medical staff, most of whom had worked without rest since the explosion occurred. Canada's federal prison ombudsman says our prison system is fundamentally ill-equipped for long-term mental health care. Ivan Zinger says weak policies, insufficient training, and a lack of specialized treatment are hindering the Correctional Service of Canada's efforts to deliver this care to people experiencing acute psychiatric distress.
We are seeing a system that was never designed to meet the needs of those with serious mental illness. Simply put, these facilities are outdated, ill-equipped, and increasingly resemble warehouses for the mentally ill and for aging and medically vulnerable individuals, rather than places of care, treatment, and recovery. I recommend that the Government of Canada directs the service to partner with provincial healthcare system in order to expand access to psychiatric beds in the community.
I wouldn't necessarily say that Correctional Service of Canada does the work that they do based on public perception, but certainly when there is a tough on crime environment like the one that we're living in right now, there's less willingness to understand how the people who are becoming incarcerated are the people who are at the most need of support in our communities, the most marginalized, the most forgotten, the poorest. And these are people who have mental health disabilities, who have substance use issues, and who are not receiving the care they need in community.
Ivan Zinger is leaving his position as federal prison ombudsman 2 years early, admitting that he is leaving with a fair amount of frustration with the system and how it operates. And Ottawa wants to hire a new parliamentary budget officer. The independent agent of Parliament offers analysis of budgets, campaign promises, and other spending plans. The Liberals appointed Jason Jakes as interim PBO 6 months ago, back in September, before the House of Commons began sitting. He has so far been highly critical of the federal government's fiscal plans and has cast doubt on the sustainability of Ottawa's debt management. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister says the government is sending a clear message that those who enable Russia's war against Ukraine will face consequences under Canadian law. Anita Anand today announced more sanctions on Moscow that will target those behind Russia's drone and cyber attacks on Ukraine, as well as vessels in Russia's sanctions-evading shadow fleet.
Canada will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine in the short, medium, and long term. The sovereignty of Ukraine, its territorial integrity, is one of our top priorities internationally.
We are grateful to Canada for its G7 leadership and consistent focus on Russia's war against Ukraine, and I am grateful to all of our partners for their support. This war is not only about Ukraine, it has a profound impact on international peace and security. It is critical to strengthen support for Ukraine and increase pressure on Russia. And we must make the cost of continuing this war unbearable and dangerous for Putin personally and his regime.
Canada is hosting top diplomats from the G7 countries in Ontario's Niagara region. Ministers from Ukraine, India, Mexico, and several other nations are also taking part in this gathering. Israeli President Isaac Herzog has condemned what he called a shocking and serious attack by Jewish settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank. Dozens of masked Israeli settlers attacked 2 Palestinian villages Tuesday, setting fire to cars and other property before clashing with Israeli soldiers.
هم استغلوا انه انا في عندنا شاحنه كانت جايه مروحه من خط التوزيع، مجرد ما انفتح الباب هي عمالها بدها تدخل، ما لحقتش يعني لسه تصل في نص الطريق كانوا داخلين وراها مباشرة، يعني استغلوا الباب وقف دخلوا كلهم، فدخلوا تقريبا يعني يتعدوا 50-60 واحد. طبعا هدول اللي كانوا موجودين جوا مقر الشركة غير المجموعة الكبيرة اللي كانت برا على جهة الشارع وفي منطقة الأراضي.
Settler attacks have surged since the war in Gaza erupted 2 years ago, and they've intensified in recent weeks as Palestinians harvest their olive trees in an annual ritual. U.S. House lawmakers are making a long-awaited return to Washington, D.C. after nearly 8 weeks away. It could potentially put an end to the longest U.S. federal government shutdown in American history, as early as today. The House is scheduled to take up a bill to reopen the government that the Senate passed on earlier this week. It remains to be seen if travel delays due to the shutdown could complicate the vote, as thousands of flights have either been delayed or canceled in recent days. Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein wrote in an email from 2011 that Donald Trump had spent hours at his house with a victim of sex trafficking. Now, the White House is accusing Democrats of selectively leaking emails to create a fake narrative to smear President Trump. Michael Sisak of the Associated Press has the details.
In the latest twist in the Jeffrey Epstein saga, new emails have been released by House Democrats in which Epstein wrote about President Donald Trump. In one of the emails from 2019, Epstein told a journalist that Trump knew about the girls, but the context of what Trump may have known isn't clear. In a 2011 email, Epstein told his confidant and former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, that Trump had spent some time with a person identified by House Democrats as a victim of his sex offenses. Trump has denied wrongdoing, and one of the people identified as a person mentioned in the emails, Virginia Giuffre, has denied that Trump was one of the men who assaulted her. Giuffre wrote in a memoir published after her death this year that Trump was a gentleman when she met him at his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida. And Maxwell was interviewed by the Justice Department's second-in-command in July. She said that she never saw Trump do anything untoward with anybody. The White House contends that the release of emails related to Donald Trump is part of a smear campaign against the Republican president.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep.
President Trump has consistently denied any knowledge of Epstein's alleged crimes. The latest national rent report shows a further national decline, with 6 cities in Alberta finding themselves in the top 10 of lowest rent averages in the top 60 Canadian markets. The national average currently sits at $2,105, a 2.2% decline from this time last year, with the biggest drop coming from condominiums. Lethbridge is the 9th cheapest city for renting in Canada, with an average of $1,570. One-bedroom prices go for $1,321, while 2 bedrooms settled at $1,628. Still, lower averages can be found in Edmonton, Red Deer, Fort McMurray, Medicine Hat, and Lloydminster, with the latter being the 2nd cheapest city in Canada for rent at $1,244. Calgary posts a significantly higher average at $1,851, but still finds itself in the top 20 lowest rental rates. The report suggests that the year-over-year declines each month are beginning to soften, while BC and Alberta continue to witness steep drops in prices at double-digit rates. A bail hearing was held Wednesday for a 12-year-old Lethbridge boy who is facing an attempted murder charge. It's alleged the boy tried to kill his 7-year-old brother last August. According to police, the boy was home alone with his 7-year-old brother, where police determined he repeatedly stabbed him with a knife, then lied to police during the investigation, telling officers an intruder broke into the Northside home and stabbed his brother. Police say the 12-year-old became a suspect after they recovered a knife as evidence. However, this afternoon, the bail hearing was adjourned to November 26th in order to review a report under Section 34 of the Youth Criminal Justice Act, where the suspect was granted a psychological, psychiatric, and risk assessment. As of date, no findings in fact have been issued, and the boy remains in custody. The town of Coaldale has reached an agreement with the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees after union workers were locked out for over 2 months. The deal was ratified on November 10th and will remain in effect until December 31st, 2028. The 40 AUPA workers will get a 12% wage increase over the next 4 years, with the town covering 75% of employee benefit premiums. The two sides returned back to bargaining on October 29th, following an order from the Alberta Labour Relations Board, with the town presenting the union with an offer on November 6th. AUPE members took part in a second ratification vote on Monday after the first vote was invalidated. Employees will return to work on the 17th. As we approach one of the most anticipated holidays of the year, mental health care centre Woods Homes is reaching out to the community to ask for help. With the Homes for the Holidays campaign, the organization is hoping to turn what can be a difficult season for many children, youth, and families in need into something special. Kelsey DeRoche, program supervisor with Woods Homes Lethbridge Opportunity Hub, says the community's generosity can transform hardship into hope.
A few different options. You can sponsor programs, you can sponsor youth, or you can just donate generally. We really want to highlight our adopt a client portion of this. So we work with young people who are 16 to 24 who live independently and who often are quite isolated over the holiday season. So we are really trying to support them through this time and make sure that everyone has a gift that they can open on that day. So we have in all of our programs, like around 100 youth, I would say. You can also adopt a program and donate like a dinner or something like that. The best way is just to go onto our website to support during this time and in helping our young people find some happiness during the holidays.
Woods Homes provides more than 40 programs in 5 locations across Alberta. Grey Cup week is in full swing in Winnipeg. The Montreal Alouettes will take on the Saskatchewan Roughriders in Sunday's 112th Grey Cup game. The coaches held their joint news conference today, with former Toronto Argos coach Ryan Dinwiddie being hired as the new coach and general manager in Ottawa. Saskatchewan's Corey Mace and Montreal's Jason Maas were asked if they aspire to be GMs one day.
I'm not involved with contracts, but I'm involved with the day-to-day personnel on our football team, and obviously having a say on our 45-man roster and who's in our building. That, and then in the off-season dealing with all those things. But, is that what I focus on? No, not whatsoever. Is that something I aspire to do down the road? Not really thinking about it, to be quite honest with you. I'm just aware of it because it's out there and you see it. And it seems like a lot of guys become head coaches and then move on to that at some point. And I can understand it because as a head coach, you are, around it quite a bit. But right now, my main focus and everything I love to do is in coaching.
Yeah, I'm only a year or two doing what I'm currently doing, and that's, my focus is completely there. But, the relationship that J.O. and I have, similar to Jay and Danny, we're hands-on putting a roster together and anybody coming in and out of the building. So, my brain hasn't even gone that direction, just focused on what's on my plate currently.
Sunday's Grey Cup game will be the 20th appearance for both teams. The Alouettes will attempt to win their 9th championship, while the Rough Riders will attempt to win their 5th. New data from Statistics Canada shows Canadians continue to shun travel to the United States in October, meaning another month of year-over-year declines. We get more from Michelle Zadikian with the Canadian Press.
Canadian resident return trips from the U.S. by car dropped nearly 31% in the month. Return trips by plane sank at 24%. The numbers show Canadians are standing pat on their U.S. travel boycott as U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war continues and fears persist over potential treatment at the border. A U.S. Travel Association report expects spending from inbound travelers will fall 3.2% this year to $173 billion U.S. dollars, with significantly fewer visits from Canadians as the primary reason. Meanwhile, the StatCan data shows Canadians are choosing to travel elsewhere. The number of Canadian residents returning from overseas countries rose roughly 7% in October from a year ago.
With the clock ticking down to the holidays, job postings are perking up. However, job seekers still might find it difficult to land one of those positions. A new Indeed Canada report shows holiday job postings are up 12% so far this season compared with the same time a year ago. The company's Brandon Bernard says this year was more upbeat as consumer spending seems to be stabilizing and many retailers have had a fairly solid year. High interest rates and inflation overshadowed the last two holidays. The two trends tempered any appetite for hiring as households reined in spending. A new survey also suggests many Canadians are cutting back on holiday spending as the cost of living goes up. The poll from insolvency firm Harris & Partners shows 72% of the more than 1,800 Canadians surveyed say they will cut back on spending. About 62% say they do not feel financially prepared for the holidays. And more than half have anxiety about affording it. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 418 to 30,827. The Dow was up 326 to 48,254. The S&P 500 was up 4 to 6,850, and the Nasdaq was down 61 to 23,406. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $2.56 to $58.48 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 3 cents to $4.52 US. Gold was up 68.11 to $41.9491 US an ounce, and silver was up $2.03 to $53.25 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.29 per bushel, barley is at $5.66, canola is at $14.63, and corn is at $7.39 per bushel. Live cattle December contract was down $1.92 to $2.2527. Feeder cattle were up $1.35 to $3.3902. And lean hogs December contract was down $1.72 to $80.62. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at $71.40 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, a new Leger poll suggests Canadians were underwhelmed by affordability measures in the federal budget, with only 15% saying they think the Liberals' spending proposals will improve their lives. Leger's Andrew N. says the budget has enough in it for supporters of various parties to make it difficult for any party to structure an election campaign around it. The budget will be put to a vote in the House of Commons next week. Prime Minister Mark Carney called pipelines boring in a speech in front of a Toronto audience. I'm not so sure that descriptor would go over so well here in Alberta. Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly joins me next to chat about this and more coming up. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.